Namaskar and a very good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow architects, members of the National Film Archives of India, colleagues at my work, friends, and those guests who have come from other parts of the cities in India, and many of those victims of my numerous Facebook and WhatsApp messages asking you to come over here this evening. Above all, students of architecture. I welcome all of you to the very first edition of the International Film Festival in India on architecture and urbanism. It is with sheer delight I stand before you today as the curator of India House Art Gallery and the founder of Christopher Charles Benninger Architects. I am humbled to see such an august gathering come over here despite inclement weather and having taken your precious time to be here to see these films. My sincere apologies for not being able to serve tea, although it was mentioned high tea in the program because of those unpredictable rains which are out there. I must confess, this morning I had a kind of let's call it a panic attack, because this is the first time we are organizing a film festival and we don't know beans about it. So I have approached an Ayurvedic doctor, and the Ayurvedic doctor said that take this very kind of old ancient medicine. It's made out of grapes, and he said take it and you will be all right. You will speak well and the film festival will go well. And that doctor's name is Christopher Benninger, and French call this Ayurvedic medicine Cabernet Shiraz. So if I do well, then it's the medicine. Okay? It is a dream of mine that unfolds, which has its beginnings from a casual talk that took between the director of National Film Archives, Mr. Prakash Maktoum, who's not here with us today for attending his duties somewhere else. I'm greatly thankful to the National Film Archives of India in Pune. As you know, there can be no better place than National Film Archives to host such an event, which is an institute of eminence when it comes to cinema. This journey began at the beginning of this year when I watched a few films along with a colleague of mine. And then we thought about why don't we share these films with other colleagues and other friends, because they were very enriching. And then I got in touch with the filmmakers. Firstly, I never got any response back from them. Over several exchanges of emails, the filmmakers of these films accepted my proposal to show their films. They were generous to give these films foregoing exponential charges, screening charges, to bare minimum, and a few of them were a little bit more generous to give them pro bono. Practically with meager budgets and no sponsorships and no tickets to be sold. So you can imagine it's like a task like making a biryani without garam masala, right? So, but our beginnings have been humble, so we are very humble to have these very first edition, but we wish to dream bigger. Let's hope next year we'll do it much better. I sincerely hope the film festival will find a befitting position in the calendar of Indian architectural events. You see, friends, architecture is something that I'm married into for the past 25 years. Call it my fate or call it my calling. I am here, and now I am here amongst you to do my bit to enrich all of us today by watching these films. To me, it is very important as an observer to the field of architecture to bring these films that are not only educational in purpose, but also as instruments to spark a new discussion on the way we live, in the way our societies are morphing, and in the way we look at our future and the future in our cities. I have been absorbing like a giant sponge all that came in my way in understanding what is architecture, in celebrating many chance meetings and meeting many important architects and those architects who also silently did their bit in bettering our human habitats. My journey has many stories, and that all of you have shared over time. I certainly owe my mentor Christopher Benninger for having told stories of life through architecture, and many of his friends, some of them are sitting over here, those who have enriched my learning over time. To me, these folklores are what I live with. As the curator of this film festival, I have carefully chosen a variety of films. Some of them celebrate iconic buildings, some celebrate the concerns we share collectively about our cities, some question the way we live, some films are prescriptive to the urban problems, while one of the film talks about the wrath nature imposes on our built environment and how human societies show their resilience to challenge God's test to our living. If we have to draw a parallel between cinema and architecture, both fields are creative, both fields are collaborative, both fields are communicative, all at the same time. Both cinema and architecture face similar challenges. They both become what they are from a speck of an idea into an ideology. To me, they both involve a cross-section of people of any given society. Friends, these are the two fields where cinema and architecture employ marginal people in a society, such as construction workers on any of our given sites, to the spot boys who are in a shooting location occupying one end of the spectrum, while the other end of the spectrum is occupied by those who fund those films and the patrons of architecture. Both seek acceptance of audience. In the end, it is a true reward for a filmmaker when he sees those audience having a smile on their face and walk out of watching that film. Then he feels that film has been very successful. In a similar manner, an architect feels very happy when he sees the people living in his buildings quite happy about the way it has been designed. It is that approval that sends the message that the film is good, or if the building has served its purpose. Both are extremely difficult fields when it comes to creative expression, which is curtailed by numerous regulatory mechanisms, where funds are never enough while the aspirations are numerous. Despite all these constraints, films are made, buildings are built, some for the sake of utilitarian goals, while some for the sake of art. Both are a reflection of the time that we live, and they are a mirror of the society that we belong to. Both a building and a film aims to become timeless. They are permanent and transcendental all at the same time. If a film or a piece of architecture negates all these constraints and tries to profoundly influence us, we call such films and such architecture timeless. I shall briefly touch upon 7 films which we watch in the next several hours over today and tomorrow. The first one being Shifting Valley. Now, Shifting Valley is a film by Kishore Kayastha. He is a professional photographer who documented the monuments and life of people in Kathmandu Valley before and after the 2015 Nepal earthquake. The film witnesses the resilience of the Nepali people and how they are trying their utmost best to continue with their life despite all the difficulties they had to face in fulfilling their duties towards their family, in fulfilling their duties toward their communities, all while abiding by the traditional rituals and living the life that ancient Kathmandu Valley demands. The next film that we will be seeing today is Urbanized. Directed by Gary Hootswitz, this film Urbanized explores the design of cities. This film was premiered in 2011 in the Toronto International Film Festival. Subsequently, it has traveled to about 100 cities over 20 different countries. Friends, today we are lucky to have this film being screened for the first time in India at the National Film Archives in Pune. We know by now half of the world's population is living in urban centers, and by 2050, almost 75% of the people living on this world, about 9 billion people, will call a city their home. The film brings about the world's foremost architects, policy makers, the planners, builders, thinkers to frame a global discussion on the future of cities. The next film that I will be talking about is Building the Gherkin. I'm sure some of you have already seen this building in London. Mirjam von Arx, the director of the film Building the Gherkin, explores how a single building can impact the career of an architect, the image of a global company, and the skyline of a big city like London. This film, made in 2005, explores the controversies that arose after the World Trade Center attack in New York. This 40-story building, glass and steel building, sparks further controversy due to its size and shape, awkwardly nicknamed as the erotic gherkin. Let's explore through this film if the gherkin, designed by the world's most important visionary architect, Sir Norman Foster, becomes the landmark Londoners were aspiring for. The next film, The Edge of the Possible, directed by Daryl DeLora, talks about the Sydney Opera, greatest building of Australia and one of the finest achievements of modern architecture. This film charts the dramatic course of the creation of a masterpiece by Danish architect Jan Utzon, who started designing this building in 1957 only to be told to leave Australia in 1966 because of political pressure. He regained his lost honor only in 2007 when this building was given the importance of being in the World Heritage Monuments as work of human creative genius and calling it one of the greatest buildings of the 20th century. Microtopia, the next film, is about creating small homes, micro-dwellings, downsizing and living off the grid of the city. Directed by Jasper Wasmister, explores how architects, artists, people like you and I, who push the limits to find answers to portability and flexibility by learning from modern nomads, homeless people, people in stress, people who seek privacy and seclusion. Microtopia addresses creatively these situations on rooftops, on sidewalks, industrial landscapes, and in nature along with their creators. The Human Scale, the next film, directed by Andreas Dalsgaard, explores the possibilities of creating life in between the buildings. Friends, you know cities today are a gigantic system of high-rise buildings and highways where we live our lives in separate boxes. Revolutionary Danish architect Jan Gehl focuses on the connection between the human-created environment and the quality of life in cities such as Copenhagen to Beijing, Melbourne to Los Angeles, Shanghai to New York, and from Christchurch to Dhaka. The last film that we will be seeing, which will be tomorrow in the evening, is Into the Unknown, a film made by Sankalp Meshram, a graduate of the Film Institute of India, Pune. explores one of the greatest buildings of one of the greatest modern architects of India, Charles Correa. The Champalimaud Center for the Unknown in Lisbon, Portugal, is a center for medical research that studies and treats patients who have cancer and brain diseases. Charles Correa describes it as a place where architecture becomes therapeutic to the patients. It is for us to leave this auditorium with several questions, to seek and explore answers about cinema, about architecture, and their influence on our lives. In closing my message, I must bring to your notice the crucial importance of imagination, which is the basis for both cinema and architecture, and both are subjected to a greater sense of failure due to lack of imagination. Imagination is a rare ability of what is not there, and therefore is the basis for all sorts of innovations and inventions. It is the power that enables us to empathize with humans whose experiences we have never shared. Unlike any other creature on this planet, humans can learn and understand without having a real experience. Or let's call it our own simulation. One can use such power of imagination to manipulate and control just as much to understand or sympathize, and many prefer not to exercise their imagination at all. These filmmakers chose to touch our lives with their imagination. They felt it is that unique gift of imagination that they possessed which drove them to make these films. Ladies and gentlemen, all of us sitting over here in this auditorium are the privileged lot. Let's learn from the imaginations of these filmmakers, and let us also start to imagine collectively how we can make our life much more purposeful and meaningful. The last point I wish to make is one has to go beyond time to make anything timeless, and a good film and a good architecture has to appeal beyond cultural contexts and geographical boundaries. Only such films and buildings become relevant for future human societies and generations that will live. Ladies and gentlemen, in the film festival here, we are proud to bring to you some of the moments that reflect the timelessness. If we remember Satyajit Ray, if we remember Tornatore, if we remember Louis Kahn, if we remember Charles Correa and Zaha Hadid, it is for that creative excellence that they have achieved through their careful crafting of their work. Their work is an inspiration for all of us. It is their work that tells us to dream bigger, and it is such films and such architecture that we learn from, and they enrich our civilization. Let's watch the films. Thank you very much.